Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano, is in session.
All right, welcome to Faith on Trial, where we examine the influence of law and society on people of faith. I'm Deacon Mike Mano, your host today, and I'm going to be going solo. Gina has the day off, so you'll just have me today. Anyway, we do have a good program for you, ready to go. We have Catherine C. Gorka, who is the Director of Civil Society and American Dialogue at the Heritage Foundation. She's a co-author of a new report called, actually it's not a new report, it came out in the fall, but it's called How Cultural Marxism Threatens the United States of America and How We Can Fight It. That's going to be an interesting segment. And then we have Logan Church, who is a campaign director at CatholicVote, on the LA Dodgers honoring the blasphemous mock nuns, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And that's going to be another interesting thing because we have that coming up in another week. All right, we have Deacon Tony Valdez here to open us up with Gina's normal prayer.
God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world, peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of the earth. Turn to your way of love those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. Strengthen us in hope, and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Tony. There's nobody that can do Gina's prayer quite like a deacon could do Gina's prayer. So thank you very much.
Thank you
Certainly
so much.
Appreciate it. And we'll be right back after these messages with Catherine Gorka of the Heritage Foundation on our discussion of cultural Marxism and what we can do about it. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. And we're back. We're with Catherine C. Gorka, goes by Katie, I guess, who is the Director of Civil Society and the American Dialogue at the Heritage Foundation, on her report, or she was a co-author of the report of How Cultural Marxism Threatens the United States and How Americans Can Fight Back. Katie, it's so nice to have you here. You know, I was mentioning to my co-host, who has the day off today, some time ago, that we don't go a month around here without having somebody from the Heritage Foundation on, because that's how important you guys are to us and what information you're able to bring out. And this report that you co-authored is, I guess, a hallmark of that, because I thought it was very well done. I think it was released back in November. Don't know why I didn't see it until now, but I just did. But anyway, welcome to the program. We don't think we've had you on before, and so we'll try and treat you very nicely. But it was a very good report. And so maybe we can start off with what the genesis of the report was. What got you looking at cultural Marxism in the United States?
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. And let me just start with a point of clarification. When I wrote the report, the position that you named is the position that I was actually in at the Heritage Foundation, but I have since left.
Oh.
I remained a huge fan, and I remain very, very active. But what ended up happening is my colleague, Mike Gonzalez, he's my co-author.
Right.
He and I actually got a book contract on the basis of this article, and so I left my job so that I could write full-time, which is what I'm now doing. We're under the gun. We have to get our manuscript in by September 1st, so this is what we're doing full-time.
Oh, great.
And, yeah.
Yeah, great.
So,
I know he's written a book because we've had him on a time or two, and we've promoted his book, and I got the book.
Yeah, he's actually got a couple of absolutely great books, one on identity politics and one on Black Lives Matter. And that was sort of the genesis of this project, because he said to me one day, in frustration with this problem of what we call next-gen Marxism, but you could also call it cultural Marxism, but you could also just call it the insanity that's happening in our culture right now. And he said he's very good at describing the problem, but he's not good at coming up with the solution and coming up with a strategy. And I said to him, well, I've been working on strategy for the last 20 years. My husband and I both, we've done a lot of work for the government, for the FBI, mostly on counterterrorism issues. But, once you get that sort of national security strategy mindset, you can apply it to a lot of things. So we decided to collaborate. He would focus more on describing the problem, and I would focus more on developing the strategy to combat it. And it's been a great partnership, and the book will be out early in 2024.
Very good. We'll look forward to that, and we'll promote it when it comes out. Matter of fact, we'll have you back on when it comes out, and we'll talk about that. You mentioned your husband. I wasn't going to go here, but your husband is Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who
yes, he is.
Many of us know from other venues, and a very good man, a very intelligent man, and we appreciate your husband and what he does.
Well, thank you for saying so. I appreciate that.
But right now, we appreciate you more than anybody else because
thank you,
because you're the one that co-authored this report. Okay, so we know how kind of it came from. I think you started off with the problems of that communism and Marxism met in capitalism, and you seem to indicate that maybe part of our problem with cultural Marxism is because capitalism did what it was supposed to do.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that Mike found when he started doing this research, he found this amazing quote from the year 1989. I will certainly say 1989 loomed very large in my life because that was, of course, the year the Berlin Wall fell. And I decided because of that momentous event, I started traveling and working in Central and Eastern Europe to see what it was like to live through this incredible change of transitioning out of communism. And then, of course, I met my husband over there, and I ended up living in Hungary for 12 years, which was an extraordinary education. And that's when I really came to understand what is so precious about the United States, because I was living with the wreckage of communism and what communism does to a society. And trust me, that legacy goes on for years. But the interesting thing is, in that very same year, when most of us were focused on Eastern Europe and what we thought was the victory over communism, there was a journalist at the New York Times who wrote an article, and that she said, actually, 1989 is the year that Marxism has sort of become mainstream, or at least acceptable, in American universities. And I mean, this is just a really fascinating idea. And this, of course, is we're seeing the outcome of that today. And this is the book that we wanted to write. Now, I think there's a couple things that are really important here. I think it's really important that we all understand how we got here. I mean, most Americans, honestly, are flabbergasted at what's happened just in the last 3 years. I mean, it still blows my mind that we have major U.S. companies using transgender characters to promote their products, that we have our military using transgender figures to promote our military, and that we have even parents, but teachers, pushing the idea that children may be born in the wrong body and therefore they should mutilate themselves to feel more at home in their body. I mean, none of this stuff makes sense to a reasonable person. And yet there has to be an explanation for how we've arrived here. And that's what Mike and I have been working on. And then even more importantly, once you figure it out, okay, so what do we do about it? And this is a really big question. And, to some extent, I think it's already happening. I mean, don't you just find it amazing what's happened with Target, with Bud Light, with these various companies over the last few months? I think it is so interesting to see how the American people are pushing back. And I have to say, I think this is really where the answer lies. when I left the Heritage Foundation last July, my primary reason was to be able to have the time and the quiet to write this book, which I thought was really important. But the other thing I said when I left is that now that I would have a little bit more time in my hands, I would dedicate myself to local politics. You know, I've spent my whole life working on national security policy and national policies, thinking that solutions happen at the national level. And I think what I've come to realize more than anything in the last few years is that it's really all local. And if we can't fix it...
that was one of your recommendations as to how to fight back, was to focus locally, because so much of what is going on, the genesis of it is somewhere locally.
And if we can't fix it locally, we're not going to fix it nationally. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think one of the things that we've kind of forgotten, and truly that our schools don't sufficiently teach anymore, is that we are a self-governing republic, right? There is nobody who's going to swoop in and save us from ourselves. Only we can do that. If we don't engage as citizens and take a very active role in the shape of our country, in how it's ruled, in the decisions that are made, then we're going to end up where we are. And I think this is the problem. I think
it's a Republican it's a republic if we can keep it. Right?
Exactly.
Isn't that the words from Benjamin Franklin? It's a republic if we can keep it, and we're not doing a very good job, it looks like right now, in trying to keep that.
Well, I'm ever an optimist, and then that's partly my husband's influence. He refuses to be pessimistic. He says it's un-American to be pessimistic, and I have to agree. I mean, I have to say, I'm feeling pretty good right now. You know, I love what I'm seeing when I look at groups like Moms for Liberty, you know, which just in a few years' time now has, I can't remember the number, maybe 140,000 members. They have over 200 chapters. I mean, these are moms around the country who are standing up and saying enough is enough.
Right, and they've also caught the attention of the Southern Poverty Law Center that considers them a hate group now, too.
Oh, yes, they have. And I have to say the Southern Poverty Law Center are the biggest bullies that I know of. And I say to every parent who's been intimidated by anybody, whether it's the Southern Poverty Law Center or anybody, just ignore them. What they say does not matter, and just keep fighting for the rights of your children. And that's what we all have to do. Right. We all have to keep fighting for this country that we love, because it's too precious to let it go. It's too precious to lose it.
All right, let's go back to the beginning of this cultural Marxism. I guess most of it began in the academy, but what I think, as again, a simplified version of what you said in the report, the triumph of capitalism, which did not lock people down into their poverty, because people could come out of poverty, was one of the things that caused, I guess, what we would call the cultural shift in communism and in Marxist philosophy, at least in the United States.
Well, explain to me more what you mean by that. When you say it caused, I know what you're talking about, because what you're saying is, yes, this was a point that we made in the paper that and
the proletariat was gone.
The what?
The labor with no means of production and an inability to raise themselves from poverty was gone because of capitalism. Capitalism was able to provide the essential needs for everyone, and people found that there was a way that they could rise above poverty. So poverty wasn't something that held people down as much as it did before. And so now the Marxists then were looking for another way to spread their theory, and instead of looking at labor as the category, they were looking at other things, mutable things like race and gender and things like that. And that's where they started focusing on what we see going on now.
Yes, exactly. So the problem that socialism has always had, and that socialists, beginning with Marx, but there have been many, many others, the problem that they've always had is that workers, even when they were in poorer countries like Italy or other places, most workers, even if they were unhappy, they wanted simply to fight for better conditions. Most of them didn't want to overthrow the system they were in, right?
Right.
And that's certainly been the case in this country. I mean, you had millions of people flee from poverty and come to this country because they knew there was opportunity because of our free market system to do better. And even if people had to put up with, poor paying jobs, be taxi drivers or work in, the packing industry or whatever, even if you had, not the best job in the world, you knew that your children would probably be better off than you were, right? And so you wanted to hold on to those jobs. You didn't want to start a revolution, and that was why socialism ultimately failed in this country. But the thing, what you're talking about is this very important shift that took place. If I had to pin it down to 1 year, I'd put it at 1960, but it was really a transition that was happening kind of throughout the 50s and into the early 60s, where radical progressives in this country said workers will no longer be the ones to carry out the socialist revolution. We're going to look instead to the students and to the intellectuals. And that is really what happened, and hence the takeover of the universities. I mean, this really started with the group Students for Democratic Society. They started in 1960. They were quickly radicalized. I mean, a group of them became the Weathermen, which was a terrorist group, became very radical. But, what also happened is that many of those young people who were radicalized in the 1960s, okay, yes, some went off to the Weathermen and became terrorists and whatever, but many of them, actually even some of the ones who went to jail for being terrorists, many of them went into the universities themselves. And so that's where you see this long process of radicalization take place. And I think that's a part of what we're seeing today. We're seeing that process come to fruition.
All right. And they've, again, focused, it seems to me, the focus is on these immutable aspects of people that they can't overcome, they can't get out of. You can throw off poverty, but you can't throw off the color of your skin or your sexual identity or whatever. And so they seem to be aiming at those people as part of building up their strength, I guess.
Yes. So the very important thing is that when Marx came out with the Communist Manifesto and planted this seed of an idea of socialism, but it never took off. It never gained a foothold anywhere. And the real change came with Vladimir Lenin, in Russia. And what he was able to do is he developed a theory or a sort of a strategy for how you can make socialism happen. And a key part of his strategy was you have to go out and essentially radicalize the workers. You have to exacerbate every possible grievance that they might have and plant the idea that the only way that they are going to solve this problem is through revolution. And that is what he did. And that is what Students for a Democratic Society did. Now, the difference with today, of course, is that they've given up on the workers. They don't focus on the workers anymore. As you have pointed out, they are now focusing on other groups, like, whether it's the LGBT or whether it's ethnic minorities or whether it's African Americans. They've created these groups, and they really, what they do is they focus on their grievances, exacerbating their grievances, instilling in them the idea that the differences between them and the rest of the society, that these are irreconcilable differences, and that the only way things are going to get better is if you overthrow the whole system and start with something new. And I think that's the saddest thing, because, this country, yes, we have a terrible history of slavery. We have a terrible history with Jim Crow and segregation. We have a lot to be ashamed of. But I think we have a lot to be proud of as well. We have come so far in rectifying those tensions, those problems, in really living up to the founders' notion that we are all created equally. So the idea that Americans can't work together to solve this, to me, is anathema. And I think it's just so sad that the left is trying to promote this idea that our differences are irreconcilable. I don't think they're irreconcilable at all.
No, and I think what is coming up out of this, as you pointed out in your report, is the concept that some are adopting that rights don't necessarily have to be equal for all. We have to use rights to balance off, say, past discrimination. What was it Kendi said about the past discrimination can be remedied by present discrimination, and present discrimination should be remedied by future discrimination. And so they look at people's rights as being different. You may have more rights than somebody else because you're in a group. It's group rights now. It's not individual rights anymore.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, this is the whole problem with equity. And I think what is so frightening about this, and I think what too many people don't realize, is that when you decide that you're going to start trying to lift up some groups because maybe they have a disadvantage, is that you're then putting that decision-making power into the hands of individuals, right? And you create a new form of discrimination. And I think it's extremely destructive. And I think this is going to become the really big fight now. What I find really disturbing, aside from all the super disturbing stuff like the transgenderism and all that, what I find equally disturbing is how accepting many people have become of this notion of, quote, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not realizing it's actually very unconstitutional. You know, the idea of equity, the idea that we're going to decide some group should be more privileged than another, trust me, that will tear our society apart, and it will lead to tremendous abuses of power, which I think we're already seeing.
You, as long as we're on the subject, you've mentioned this in the report too, and that's how we've created so many different groups. If you look at the Census Bureau and what they ask people to identify themselves as, and corporations how they ask people to identify them. A lot of these are created groups, not necessarily nationalities, but they're created groups.
Yeah, this is a super important topic, and again, this is the topic that my colleague Mike Gonzalez has done such fantastic work on. You know, a lot of people don't realize, first of all, the census did not used to ask people to identify themselves by their ethnicity, and Mike does a terrific job of basically showing how progressive groups in the 1960s, particularly with funding from some of the really big foundations like Ford Foundation and Rockefeller Foundation, how they essentially manufactured these ideas of ethnicities, and then how destructive that's been. So I think these are questions that have to be really, we need to rethink this and come up with a better solution.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the ways that these cultural Marxists have infiltrated things like education and the argument over sex and gender and climate in particular.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the hallmark characteristics of Marx is that he reduces people to, a single characteristic. I mean, now if it's pure Marxism, you say a person is reduced purely to their sort of material self. They are only an economic being, and that's all they are. And that's part of what's happening with the neo-Marxists. They say, a person is defined by their race, or they're defined by their sexuality, and there is nothing else to them, and there is no complexity. So yeah, I think this is a really big problem, and I think we have to put back. Personally, I see less of it in the climate movement, but I'm open to hearing about it. I think I see it more obviously in some of these other areas. But I will say this as well. Mike, my co-author, found a very interesting quote by one of the people from the movement who said, the issue was never the issue. The issue is always about power. So you can basically use any issue you want, whether it's climate, whether it's sexuality, whether it's race, whether it's poverty. You use those issues to drive your accumulation of power, to drive your push for revolution. And so I think that's partly, what's happened with the climate movement. It kind of got taken over, honestly. I think there was somebody who was maybe head of Greenpeace at one point who said he was getting out because the movement had been taken over by the Marxists. And it was being sort of changed and bastardized. So, I think it's connected in that way.
All right. So we're looking at the issue is power, not necessarily what they claim it is.
Yes,
it's their
exactly.
power. It's their power. We're going to run out of time here in a few minutes, but let's quickly go over some of the things that you are suggesting as a strategy to defeat cultural Marxism. We talked a little bit at the beginning about focusing locally. Another thing you talked about was reversing the takeover of education.
Yeah, I think there's probably no more important issue in our age and in our time than education. What's going on in the schools is absolutely incredible. And people have to remember, even though public education took a big and serious hit during the COVID crisis, 90% of American children are still enrolled in public schools. We've seen the mindset of the teachers' unions, and we've seen what some of the public schools are doing. And truly, I don't think we should lump all of them into one. I think there are many fabulous, gifted teachers out there who truly care, for the children. But there are some insidious influences in the schools. There's some insidious thinking going on in the schools. We've seen ample evidence of that. People have to get control of the schools. I think there's nothing more important right now than winning school board elections, and parents exerting their rights to have a say in their children's education.
We're just about out of time right now, but I want to thank you for joining us. And is there a way that people can get a hold of you or find out what is going on? I know the Heritage Foundation has the copy of the report that people can find at heritage.org. Do you have a personal web page that tracks you or anything like that?
Yeah. So I'm at katiegorka.org. That's my personal website. Okay. And then I'm also probably most active on Facebook, and it's good question. What is my Facebook? I often go by it's at Catherine Gorka. At Catherine Gorka. Okay. Spelled with 2 A's, but or on my personal website.
Very good. Well, we appreciate your time and everything, and I do urge people to get a hold of that report and to read it, because I think it was a real eye-opener. And I wish you luck, you and Mike, on the book. Tell Mike hello. He's been on the program before. And I hope the book is an immediate success, which I think it will be. But we'll have you back to talk about that book later.
All right. Thanks so much. Thank you. It's been great talking with you.
Certainly. Thank you very much. We're going to take a short break right now, and we will be back after these messages. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, and we have with us Logan Church, who is who was from CatholicVote. and we're talking with Logan about this situation that has developed with the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. So, Logan, if you can kind of give us a thumbnail version of what is going on here, and you can say anything you want about the Los Angeles Dodgers at this point, because honestly, I would tell you my family is from Philadelphia, and I grew up as a Philadelphia Phillies fan, and if there's two teams in the National League that I do not like, it's the Dodgers and the Atlanta Braves. I've seen the Phillies have too many season-ending losses to those two teams, so I'm all into piling on the Dodgers right now.
Yeah, okay, well, that's good to know. That's good to know. I wasn't a Dodgers fan before, and I'm definitely not a Dodgers fan now. So just a brief overview of what's gone down. Originally, the LA Dodgers invited the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence to be a guest of honor for their Pride Night on June 16th. After all the backlash, they decided to rescind that offer. But after they rescinded the offer, the LGBTQ community freaked out. They cornered them and they said, you either, go forward with honoring this group or you're going to have an issue with us.
So this is a bit of a blackmail.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and because of that, they came back with this gushing apology and just said they apologized to the SPI group and members of the LGBTQ plus community and all their friends and their family, and said they would like to honor the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence on the field and give them a Community Hero Award. So not just come to the game, let's give you a good seat. No, they're coming onto the field and they're receiving an award honoring them as community heroes.
All right, what did these nuns do to deserve a hero's award? I mean, they rescue people out of burning buildings or what?
No, we've yet to figure out where exactly the hero portion comes in, and that's what makes it especially disgusting, because this group is known for their vile, disgusting attacks against Christianity and attacks against Catholicism, with mocking the crucifixion and using the cross as a stripper pole and dancing on Jesus and just glorifying sexuality, like this disgusting sexual revolution, and using Catholicism to make a mockery of it. I mean, it's truly disgusting. I can't even
it's blasphemous. Some of the things that they do are totally blasphemous.
Right, and it's a slap in the face of Catholicism and Christianity.
Yeah.
So because of that, we've raised $1 million. We're well on the way to raise $1 million for our campaign against them. Our ads are launching. We have billboards that are already going in LA, and our digital ads and TV ads are launching tomorrow in LA. So we are very excited to be able to do our part to make sure everybody knows exactly what the Dodgers are doing and how disgusting it is.
Now, the game itself, the Pride Night game, is, I believe, on the 16th?
Yes, sir.
And they're playing the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
I checked to make sure the Phillies weren't going to be in town then, but they're playing. Of course, I'd be rooting for the Phillies anyway, but I don't normally root for the Giants, but we'll root for them that night. What has been the reaction from the Catholic and Christian community in Los Angeles?
I think people are upset. And I think a lot of this plays into what we're seeing on a larger scale, where it appears that Christians and conservatives everywhere are realizing that they can speak with their pocketbook. And even people who would not have traditionally identified as conservatives are now seeing that, the left is moving farther and farther left with some of the choices that they're making, especially surrounding Pride Month. And we're seeing a lashback, whether it's Bud Light or Target. I think the Dodgers are lining themselves up to face the same type of repercussions.
Yeah, I was going to say they couldn't do themselves any worse if they would have named Dylan Mulvaney as their mascot for the evening.
Right, yeah. I mean, and I think that's, what people are realizing is, look at Target. They're down $16 billion. As someone who historically shopped at Target for any time, I needed something, an outfit, shoes, whatever, Target was a place I go, I can't even dream about going there anymore because of the choices that they're making.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people just like me who feel this way about whether it's Bud Light, Target, or the Dodgers.
Yeah. The Hispanic community is if the little bit that I've been seeing, because I'm here in Iowa and they're clear out there in the West Coast, but the little bit that trickles through is that the Hispanic community is getting stirred up about this too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are. Well, and a lot of that has to do with, Hispanic communities tend to be Christian or Catholic, but also
very
socially tend to be very, very conservative. And this is not what they want to see. So not only is L.A. the largest Catholic diocese, it also has the largest Hispanic population within the diocese. And I think this was just a huge miscalculation on the Dodgers' part. We are also advertising with over Spanish radio, Spanish TV, and we'll be doing Spanish text messages as well.
Okay. How about the hierarchy of the diocese there? What is the Archbishop and the others saying?
Well, the bishops, there have been plenty of bishops that have spoken out, and I think that Orange County, they gave as close to a statement as they're going to give. And it was a good statement saying that nobody should be mocking anybody's religion and they're opposed to what's going on. And so I think that's the best we're going to get out of the bishops.
And that's a shame, I think. I think they ought to take a stronger stand. What about the players? What are you getting from the players? I suppose they've kind of muzzled them, but...
Yeah, well, and I will say, as far as the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, they did release a statement that said, Catholics should stand against any bigotry and hate of any form. And that was kind of their statement on it. But as far as the players are concerned, there have been several players that have spoken up, the pitcher being one of them. And I think as the players start to get riled up, it'll get the other players riled up, and that'll be kind of like a mutiny from the inside. This is not what the players stand for, and they don't want it to look like it is. Even some of the players who aren't Catholic are coming out and saying, whoa, we can't be attacking other people's religions. That's not what we're about.
Are any of them considering or talking about a boycott of the game?
I haven't heard that myself, but I think that would be fabulous if they did. Okay. I have yet to hear that, though.
What are we hearing from the LGBT community about this?
Oh, just nothing but praise. I mean, as far as the vocal, and it's hard to say, is it the vocal minority? Because, of course, I'm sure there are still people in the community who don't agree with this movement. I know a handful of them that have spoken out to me personally saying this is not what they stand for. This is not, what they think, quote unquote, pride should be about. But as a whole, the vocal portion of the community is shining praise onto this group for being so heroic and brave.
Okay.
I think there's a hatred, though. The concept of pride in of itself is anti-Catholic, anti-Christian, and I think there is a hatred of Catholicism because there is a recognition that the Catholic Church has been the one standing force between a total sexual revolution and our culture, and the Catholic Church has been the only church that has truly stood firm against a lot of these movements.
Well, I think those people that are on the other side of things, so to speak, recognize that the Catholic Church is the one bulwark against all of this, and it survived over the years under all sorts of attacks from all sorts of governments, from all sorts of peoples, from all sorts of movements, because of their stand for morality and for the Catholic faith and for what the Catholic Church teaches and believes. And that the only way that evil can succeed in many respects is if the Catholic Church is fatally or mortally wounded. And so that's why the Catholic Church becomes such a target for all these people. So as we're sitting here talking about this, we've got a few days, about another week before the game itself. What are you asking people to do? How can we assist?
Yeah, so we have a boycott petition online. If you look up CatholicVote.org/Dodgers, we have all of our information online on how we're getting involved. sign the petition, or if you want to financially support the ad campaign that we're doing, there's opportunities to do that on our website as well. We have foot soldiers on the ground right now in LA trying to see if we can get a last attempt to get them to change their mind. We're doing our best here at Catholic Vote, but go to our website, check us out, and get involved.
I know the Catholic League is also doing some stuff. Are there any other individuals or groups that are allying with you to fight this?
There are a handful of groups that are interested in getting involved and have expressed an interest. We have a couple of VIPs that are wanting to speak out against it and do it in unison with us. And so a lot of that's going to be rolling out coming down the pipeline tomorrow. Okay.
And then will there be a demonstration at the ballpark that night?
So I know that there's going to be a prayerful procession starting at the cathedral before the game. And it's just going to be a peaceful procession of prayer of all faiths, walking towards the stadium, doing a procession around the stadium, and then going on their way.
Okay. Are you asking people to boycott the game?
Yes, absolutely. Boycott all things Dodgers. Don't go to the game. If you're a season ticket holder, raise some noise and make them know that you're upset. Mm-hmm. Don't give them any more time of day.
Yeah, stop buying Dodgers paraphernalia, T-shirts and whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. The only way we can really speak out is with our pocketbook.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you pointed out earlier, what we see is going on across the country right now is a pushback against what people see as being disingenuous. And I think the Dodgers have fallen into that trap. Don't know how they got there. Don't know how they're going to get themselves out of it. Maybe time will heal everything. I'm sure a pennant would help, but I'm not sure they're capable of that this year. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's still time for the Dodgers to change their mind. Do I think that it's likely? Probably not, but there's still time, and hopefully they realize that.
Yeah, have you, just out of curiosity, has anybody figured out where this came from? I mean, whose idea this was to bring in these fake nuns that blaspheme against the crucifixion?
We have yet to pinpoint the exact person. I wish that we could, but don't worry, we're still looking into that.
Okay. All right. We have just a minute or so left here. Let me just ask you this real quick, if there's anything else Catholic Vote is working on that's been under our radar lately.
Yeah. We're currently in a lawsuit with the FBI regarding the Latin Mass FBI agents undercover.
We had the FBI whistleblower on, Cal Seraphin.
Oh,
yeah,
we've
had him on. Yeah,
we love him.
Yeah.
So we're currently
he's hard not to love. He's a good, devout Catholic.
I always joke and say I could listen to him talk about anything. He's so good at communicating everything. So
he could read the phone book to us, and we'd be interested. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And then we're also continuing our campaign against church violence and the violence at the pregnancy care centers now that we're well over 300 some odd attacks since the Dobbs decision was leaked. So we're continuing to put pressure on the federal government to look into these cases. And
are they responding to that pressure at all?
Not as well as we would like, but who can expect anything better? It's the federal government.
Yeah. Wow.
So we're working on that, and we're continuing to grow our tracker online. So if you look up CatholicVote.org/churchviolence, or just Google that, it'll show you the tracker that is updated daily. And then, as always, we're continuing with our Catholic Accountability Project and making sure that we're holding our legislators on the federal level accountable to their Catholic faith when they go and vote.
Very good. And then you also have the loop, the daily loop that comes in.
Yes.
And you can get that all at CatholicVote.org.
Yep. And, I do love Iowa. I love Des Moines. I had the opportunity to host a protest in Iowa against former Congresswoman Sidney Axne.
She's got a new job now. She's got a new job now with the Department of Agriculture.
Well, they always do get a new job when they leave.
Yeah.
Well, when you sell out your faith for votes.
That's right. Well, next time you're going to be in Iowa and in the Des Moines area, let us know. We'll have you in live. We'll talk to you a little bit more about these things. But we are out of time right now. Logan Church from Catholic Vote, thank you very much for joining us. And you can follow what Catholic Vote is doing at CatholicVote.org. And we will be back right after these messages. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. And I'm back. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, and I'm going solo today because Gina has the day off. So I'm sitting here by myself thinking about what to talk about what we discussed in the last two segments. And one of the things I want to point out is when we're talking about this cultural Marxism, one of the ways it was suggested that if you read the report that we can fight cultural Marxism is to stand up for our beliefs, stand up for our legal rights in the courts. And one of the ways to do that is through a lot of these organizations that we have had on the air, like the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, Pacific Justice, the Thomas More Society. All those folks protect those rights in the courtroom. And they are a stone wall protecting us. And they need to be supported. And every time we have one of these groups on, we always recommend that while you check out their website and whatever, that if you have some spare change or something like that, you might want to pass on to them. I think it's important to make that point a little clearer after what we talked about earlier with the cultural Marxism. It's necessary that those groups be funded, and it's necessary that we do that. And so what you ought to think about doing very seriously is if you have some funds that you could donate to one of those groups, you think about doing that. And it's not just spare change. It's going to take more than that. So if you've got, $5, $10, $15, $100, whatever you have that you can send along to some of those people to help those legal efforts that we're combating all the time, it would certainly be welcome. And that includes the Heritage Foundation and Catholic Vote as well. And also you want to remember, of course, Iowa Catholic Radio, because we're bringing you these messages that you don't often hear other places. So you might want to open up your pocketbook when you're thinking about Iowa Catholic Radio as well. The Dodgers and the Giants, well, we're all going to be rooting for the Giants that night, whether you're a Giants fan or not. But you can go to CatholicVote.org and sign that petition. Certainly what is being done by the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence is blasphemous. There's enough stuff on the internet that you can find examples of what they do. I don't need to describe them on the radio for you. You can find them very easily yourself, and it is horrifying. It is the line to hell is what it is. So why the Dodgers decided to honor these people, give them a Courage Award or whatever it is, I'll never know. But anyway, check those out online, and you will see what we are up against. We're pretty much out of time right now, so let me end with our Defender's Prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Well, that's it for today. Don't forget to check out the Uncommon Good that plays this weekend on this radio station with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. And their program, like every other program that we host here in Iowa Catholic Radio, is podcast, and you can find those podcasts at iowacatholicradio.com. So if you ever miss a program, you don't hear it, or you want to hear it again, you can go back to those podcasts and find them. Anyway, we're finished for today. We will be with you again next time. Until then, have a blessed and peaceful week.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano. Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.